Hello, friends. Hello, music lovers. On this special occasion of the 100th episode of the ProgCast, I just wanted to say a few thank yous. Uh, Thank you to all of you who've been listening, enjoying the content, um, commenting to me both at bendianmusic.com and also just in the comment sections. I'm just so thrilled that there's an audience of people who want to know a little bit more about music and a little bit more detail about their favorite artists. And we've been lucky enough to get a lot of the great artists of our time onto this show and be able to ask them some probing questions. I think I've been told is what happens. But yeah, the program is just so meaningful to me as a musician. I get to be fanboy and musicologist at the same time and connect with all these incredible artists who have given so much to progressive music and all of its many faces, and to connect with an audience that feels the same way I do, that music is really an endless landscape to be explored and enjoyed. And that's what we do here, and we encourage it. We're real open stylistically, genre wise, genre unwise. And we're always on all platforms. We're on Apple Podcasts. If you don't want to watch us, you can always listen to us. I'm going to continue to get that deep material to you, more drummer to drummer talks, more of the figures involved from the Zappa scene, from the BEEFHEART scene, from the Holdsworth world. I'm going to be definitely continuing to do that with the help of my producer and enabler, Matt Stober, who is my real partner in putting this whole thing out there to the world. So it's been amazing. And this is just a huge episode for me because it's an old friend, ZOOT HORN ROLLO. I also know him as Bill Harkleroad, as many of you do. And he's brought along a friend, a new friend, but someone I've admired forever since my teen years, the great percussionist Art Tripp. And of course, those of you who know about Zappa's music and Beefheart's music know that these two gentlemen worked together on Lick My Decals and also went on to form Mallard after they both left the Magic Band. And of course, ZOOT HORN ROLLO, who I recorded with on his album We Saw Bozo Under the Sea back in 2000. We've remained good buds ever since. And he's one of those guys that remembers a lot of things. And we like to probe his memory on some of his experiences. But working with him has always been an amazing thing to be a part of that record. So lots of juicy Zappa and Beefheart details in this one, and a lot of really great background on Art Tripp. If you're not familiar with his work, uh, if there had been no Art Tripp, if there had been no Ruth Underwood, there certainly would not have been any Gregg Bendian's Interzone or any of the tuned percussion stuff that I like to put on all of my work as much as possible, from my solo stuff to my collaborations. So here we go, episode 100, Art Tripp and ZOOT HORN ROLLO. Thanks for listening. Hey, everybody, it's Gregg Bendian here to share some great musical energy with you, as we try to do every time, and get deep into some musical concepts and some music history. And today I have an old friend and a new friend I'm very happy to speak with. We have my old friend, Bill Harkleroad, ZOOT HORN ROLLO, who I did a record with some years ago. And of course, one of the legends of percussion in new music and in progressive music, Art Tripp. Thanks so much for being here, Bill, Art. Thank you.
Good to see
My
you, Greg.
pleasure.
Welcome. So you guys have some interesting commonalities, which we're going to discuss, obviously did work together a lot in a couple of different setups, particularly Captain Beefheart and also Mallard. And I would really love to ask Art, what was your lead up from doing kind of straight classical to doing more of the avant-garde classical stuff, which led you to work with people like John Cage?
Well, I was always interested in the avant-garde, as I imagine a lot of young guys are, when they, get a pretty good idea of what music is all about, and they get fairly along in the study of it. And I'm not sure exactly. I remember I went up to, I was in Cincinnati at the conservatory there, College Conservatory of Music. And I went up to Antioch to hear Max Neuhaus, and he was playing the Karlheinz Stockhausen piece, Zyklus or Zyklus, however you want to pronounce it.
Zyklus, yeah.
And I was really impressed with that. And I talked with him afterwards, and I ended up playing the same piece for my senior recital to get my bachelor's. And I just became real interested in free-form music. In fact, we had a group that we got together once in a while of guys, a clarinet player, cello player, pianist, and I'd play the marimba. And we'd just spend the evening playing free-form stuff and see what developed. And anyway, long story short, I just, at an early period, I don't know, it must have been midway through my conservatory studies, I just got real interested in the avant-garde, and it made a lot of sense to me. And at the time, I suppose typical of a young hotshot musician with a symphony, I had kind of a minor, I don't know if you call it a resentment, that all the symphony played was music that was written hundreds of years before. It was like a museum rather than a representation of what music was going on these days. Of course, the symphony is a money-making project. They're not going to play some aleatoric, some far-out piece and expect people to show up and fork over $50 a seat to hear. But so I get, from that time on, I was, I could have stayed in Cincinnati, and I'm sure I would have stayed with the symphony, and I could have done very nicely financially. But I was interested in moving on. Long story short, I ended up in New York at the Manhattan School of Music, and I was fortunate to get a scholarship. And I was studying with Fred Hinger, the renowned timpanist with the Philadelphia Orchestra for so many years. And Mr. Hinger had just taken the position of the timpanist with the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. So he would give his lessons there rather than going uptown to Manhattan School of Music. So I'd take my lessons there and then attend through school. And I really had no idea, where I was going to go. I was just kind of putting one foot ahead of the other, and whatever interested me, and just go along the flow. I'm sure maybe you had the same experience. Maybe we all have. And then I just happened to meet this fella who was the recording engineer for Zappa by the name of Dick Kunk. And his wife and my wife, we weren't married at the time, but my lady worked together as caseworkers for the city of New York. So Dick heard about me and was interested. So he invited us over to his place one evening for drinks, and we got to talking, and he was impressed. He said, I got to tell Frank about it. Well, I just heard about Zappa just a few weeks beforehand, and I thought it was, I didn't know anything about rock and roll. I mean, of course, I'd heard the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, but I know a damn thing about it except for the 50s rock. I knew a lot about that. But I remember thinking, gee, somebody gave me one of their albums. I think it was absolutely free. And I thought to myself, gee, if anybody asks me who my favorite rock and roll band is, I'll say, well, it's the Mothers of Invention, you know. And they were the only ones doing anything interesting at that time, at least that I knew about. So anyway, long story short, I got called down there and one afternoon, and Frank had me play a little bit, and he really liked what I was doing, and he realized that I played all the percussion instruments, and he'd been wanting that. So he'd never had a percussionist in the band before, and Billy Mundy was just leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I in fact got hired. So that's how it got started.
Do you remember anything about auditioning for Zappa?
Yeah, the first thing I remember was I didn't realize it was an audition. They called me down there to, which I thought I told Dick, I said, look, if you can use me for any session work, I could use the money, you know, like anything, any percussion part at all, whatever it is, drums, vibe, anything. So when he called me down there, I thought that's what that was for. I expected to play some kind of, I don't know what I expected. And, but when he invited me back into the control room, and I met up with Frank, and Herbie Cohn was there, and Susie Cream Cheese, Pamela Zarubica, and all those folks. Anyway, he says, come on out in the studio for a minute. And he said, could you play something for me? And I sat down, which I think was Billy Mundy's drums. I don't think he'd collected them yet after he left. And I hadn't sat at a set of drums in several years because I'd been playing a lot of percussion, but no trap drums. And he said, could you play something? And I said, sure. What do you want? He said, play whatever you want to play. So I just took off and just played a lot of, free form stuff. I was listening to a lot of jazz at the time, and plus with my predilection for the avant-garde, I just played all over the kit and nothing really in time or meter. I just kind of wailed for a couple of minutes, and I stopped and looked up, and he said, man, that's really good. So then he called in Roy Estrada, who was the great bass player with the Mothers. And he asked if we could, he says, can you play in 5? And I said, well, yeah. So we played for a while, and he said, this is great. And he said, hey, we're going upstate. That was on a Friday. He said, we're going upstate, play 2 gigs on Saturday and Sunday. Can you come along with us? And I said, well, yeah. I said, that sounded like a lot of fun. He said, we're supposed to have some people over on Saturday night. I don't know, he said, well, we'd give you about $500. And I said, $500?
Killer.
I mean, in those days, if you had $100 bill, you
Right.
got some attention. And $500, I said, yeah. So that's what got it started. And then when we came back, and we did a lot of gigs around the area and went to Miami. And then at that time, he was recording, he had me redo all the drum parts for Cruising with Ruben and the Jets. And we were working on We're Only In It for the Money and some other stuff which came out later. And at that point, he had, in fact, we had a couple sessions where he invited, he had Ruth Underwood come in.
Oh yeah.
At that time it was Ruth Komanoff. She hadn't married Ian yet. And she played marimba, and I played vibraphone. And that's what he used on Uncle Meat, recording Uncle Meat. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, really a lot of fun. And I liked the music, and one thing I liked about it was I could pretty much do whatever I wanted to do, because I remember I asked Frank, I said, well, look, I don't know much about, your music, I don't know. I said, I'll listen to it and learn it. He said, well, just, when we get on stage, just watch Jimmy Call Black. and you'll learn the music. So that's what I did. And he said, anytime I point to you, just do a drum solo.
Mhm.
In fact, that's how I started out with my first gig. We were up in Colgate, Ithaca. And we played in this big arena, and we were all in the dressing room, which was actually just sitting backstage in the auditorium. And he said, hey, why don't you go out and get us started? And I said, you want to just go out and start playing? He said, yeah. So I played, for about 3 to 5 minutes all by myself. And that was my first gig, so it was like I died and gone to heaven. I mean, I could play anything I wanted to play, and the stuff he was writing was very attractive. I really enjoyed it, and it was new and fresh, and there was a lot of satire involved and a lot of sarcasm, and it was just a lot of fun. I just couldn't believe I just kind of got dropped into that.
Do you think that Frank was aware of or was attracted to your pedigree in terms of having worked in avant-garde classical as a guy who loved Varese and Stravinsky and Bartok and all of those people?
Yeah.
Seems like you'd be the perfect fit. He must have known that.
Yeah, well, we had a lot of conversations, and we talked about Varese and whatever, and I would share with him my ideas of avant-garde things, at the time, and he thought that was pretty great. And in fact, I remember one time I was asking, I said, why don't we just, instead of playing a regular concert, why don't we just get on the stage and have dinner served for us? And put some microphones around and have the sound, and you're kind of like Cage, was more
Right.
interested in ambient sounds than he was what was actually going on the stage. And he thought that was great. Well, 6 months later, we did it, but it was never. He didn't acknowledge it was my idea. Not that, I mean, Frank had plenty of ideas of his own.
Yeah.
So we got along that way, and I think he appreciated guys that could play. When they started out, the guys, good rock and roll players, but nobody was conservatory trained. And then he added Don Preston and Bunk Gardner, and then he added the fabulous Ian Underwood, who's probably the best musician I ever played with. Ian was just beyond the beyond. The stuff he could sight read, it was just I couldn't believe it.
But that is the transition point where Frank starts addressing more of what he needs from his contemporary classical roots.
Yeah.
Integrated more into the Mothers. I think it's really your appearance on the scene, and of course the continuation by having Ruth. This becomes a very important part of his sound world, to have percussion and tune percussion and lots of it.
Yeah, I think so. And you have to remember, I don't know your age, but in the 60s, very few guys, played in odd meters or anything other than it's either a waltz or a march.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I remember Don Ellis told me one time, he came to my house by accident. Anyway, we spent the afternoon chatting, and he said the only reason that he hired was it Steve Bonahan, or I think that's his name, in New York, because he said he was the only guy in New York that could play in five. I said, you're kidding. And he said, no, I mean, that's the way it was then. The people weren't doing that then. So, I think I feel certain that Frank saw in me something that he could use and to develop his own concept and his own ideas. I mean, I was part of that.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to me that there was any kind of collaboration with guys in the Mothers, whereas I heard a quote of Frank from someone who worked with him. Frank said, I don't collaborate, I accommodate.
Yeah, that's probably true. You know, I don't think, with the exception maybe Don Preston, I don't think anybody ever shared credit with him on anything he did. I mean, in terms of composition.
Right. Don had the Eye of Agamotto.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was. But
Yeah.
he did a couple of things. I remember we rehearsed them, but we rarely, if ever, used them. So I don't know where that went. And hell, I didn't know anything in those days. I mean, I don't know who was writing what, although I just assumed it was all Frank's stuff. But it was, you know, he came up with a lot of great ideas, and he had the, you know, he had the forceful personality to do it, and he had a good sense of the absurd, and he had the brain, and he had the gift of gab when he needed it, and he had the material. I mean, he had great ideas, and I mean, for a guy to, I mean, Frank never quit writing. I never saw him work as hard as Zappa. He just was always writing, always writing. It was like Bill, like Don Bleed. He was always painting or always drawing. It just always never stopped. You know, hardly. And Frank was always writing. You know, after the show, he'd go back to the room, and out come the music paper and whatever he was using, and he'd be writing. And so he never. And when he was at Woodrow Wilson, you know, in Hollywood, there, he never left the house. Very rarely, and he's always working. And so, because I think he just really loved it, and he was driven, and I think a lot of the guys that get as far as Frank did, in light of the stuff that he was doing, it takes that kind of a person, you know. So,
Yeah, and I'm wondering, Bill, to what degree were you aware of the Mothers before Frank comes on to the BEEFHEART scene?
Well, we were all in the same hometown, right? So I saw Frank when I was like 11 or 12 years old, snuck into a gymnasium to play basketball, and they were on the stage playing doo-wop. And so I knew about him, you know, way early. It was for me, you know, how do I say it? He's already talked about the albums, but Freak Out and Absolutely Free. I mean, that just changed my world, you know, going, you know, I don't come from the backgrounds you guys come from. I was a street blues player, or, you know, surf music and stuff before the Beatles. But that was just, I mean, like Art just said, it's just like it was so strong and so different, but still put through a pop venue, right? Or it wasn't jazz club music, right? It was sold in record stores like everything else. So I was totally, those were the two guys, Don and Frank. And before I was there, so that's why I was so easily picked up and drawn into what that scene became, let's say.
And you guys had worked together, you and Art had worked together before, correct?
Before what?
Before you worked in BEEFHEART's group?
No,
You didn't play.
No, I met Art in, he knows, I from the other interview, I know Art remembers the place. It was the Hullabaloo or someplace in Hollywood. And we were the act before them. And that's the first time he heard us. And that's when I met Art. And then it came Social. And then the evolution that Art should explain is how he got into the group. But Art was brought in right after Trout Mask.
I think that was, yeah. And I think that was, as I recall, at which was the Aquarius Theater. It used to be the Hullabaloo.
Oh, that's right.
They would still call it Hullabaloo. I don't remember.
No, but I think you're right.
It was a free concert for, I think it was the LA Free Press or something. But they had, I mean, Jethro Tull was there, and Don Ellis, and Canned Heat, as I remember.
What a bill.
We did our show, and so I went out afterwards, and BEEFHEART and the Magic Band came on. And I went out and sat down at the audience, and I thought, Jesus, this is too much, man. These guys are something else.
I think that was the
really
only gig
loved
that
the
we played.
material, you know, all that Trassmas stuff was just fabulous. And I couldn't, you know, I just thought it was amazing. So I went back to, and that's when I met the guys. I had met Don earlier up at Frank's house, but I didn't, you know, nothing came of that. But
Probably
no,
the
Bill
only
and I
time we
met
played those tunes.
what's that?
I said, probably the only time we played those tunes. That's all we were doing until, so we had just finished it, or I think we did. I don't even know. I can't remember the date. Maybe we hadn't even recorded it yet, but that's really the only time I remember playing those tunes only. We might have done one or two, you know, in later gigs, but that's the only time I remember doing Trout Mask.
Well, of course, they weren't long shows either. You know,
They weren't long tunes either.
yeah, I think I don't know, maybe 30 minutes or something. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I can't remember whether you had done Trout Mask or before or after that show.
It's almost, such an identical time period that I can't remember. You know, it's 1969. Okay.
Yeah.
Greg, can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Talking about 1968, 1969. And at that time, the Mothers and the Magic Band are both working, working away on music. But you're telling me that the Magic Band would only gig that material once?
Mm-hmm. We did a tune or two, you know, off, you know, during the time that Art and I were playing together, all those years, but never that material as a thing, you know. It was just one off.
Exclusively. You're talking about exclusively playing material.
Yeah, it was just that
Yeah.
material. Yeah, so that it had
Right.
that heavy hit, because
Yeah.
even when we played the Trout Mask tunes later, they filtered into a little more bluesy-ish way that we were playing later. So it kind of morphed into that. And the ones that we would pick from it would match more of what we were playing at that time, which is post decals.
Right. Did a lot of decals along with Trout Mask and the other stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I want to get into that as well, but I'm curious, Bill, growing up where you did, so what is your impression of Zappa at that early point?
Before I met him, before I was around him, I thought, I mean, again, as soon as I heard Freak Out, I was done. It was like, are you kidding me? And then Captain Beefheart and Frank Zappa from the town, and I've seen both of these guys. I'd met Don, you know, I was in high school, and I'm going, these guys, and they're in the same town I live in. How did that happen? What the hell? You know, and that's kind of where the four of us that did Trout Mask, right, just before Art was in the group, we're all thinking the same thing, because by one, these teenagers are going into the group, right? So, but I was very impressed with Frank. I saw him on the, what was it? It was a talk show. I can't remember his name. Steve Allen show, right? Doing Bicycle and all of that stuff. And I'm going, okay, this is new, because you guys had that background. I didn't. But within the first 2 weeks I was in the group, I met Harry Parch. So I knew I was in a different world.
I don't think I ever heard you talk about that. You met Harry Parch?
Yeah. First couple of weeks.
Part friends, or how did you meet him?
No, it was Frank. It was Art was there for my tryout. You were rehearsing with the Mothers in the basement with a bowling alley in it, right?
Yeah.
Tom Mick's place.
The old Tom Mick's log cabin.
Right, and that's where the Rolling Stones were, and that was my tryout. So I'm losing my track of thought here, forgetting where I'm going, but Zappa and all that. So yeah, I was primed for it. I mean, it was just too many things. Same town, all of that. And then meeting him, of course, but you wanted to know before I met him. I mean, or I met him, you know, when I was a kid, but.
No, I guess I'm curious about early stages of musicians who, I mean, we all know Frank was a big doo-wop guy. You know, Frank was an early rock and roll kind of guy, blues guy. And it seems like that's the 60s. The 60s is that exploding into the avant-garde.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Freak Out's what, 1965?
Pardon?
Isn't Freak Out 65?
66.
Yeah.
66? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Revolver and Freak Out are both 66.
Okay.
And, you know, obviously that's the beginning of psychedelia in a way, but at the same time, there's an attitude that is coming over where I think of Parch and Beefheart as being similar kind of isolated figures. I call them the rugged American individualist. You know, guys like Charles Ives, Carl Ruggles, these kinds of guys are like, they don't give a fuck. This is what they do. And, you know, you both worked with those guys. And I mean, that's just such an incredible thing for me to think about that, you know, you were there for ground zero of this stuff. And I know, Bill, you told me you didn't really know what it was that you guys were making, did you? I mean, you didn't really have a sense of it. And when the record came out, when Trout Mask came out, you had no sense of its impact.
Too lost in the whole process, right? I was too lost in the process, and that I was schooled, like I said, Harry Parch in the first 2 weeks. I'll try to get this into art to that time, but this was the whole influencing of both of those guys. But Frank was just what he was doing. Don was trying to influence us. So we're going to go see paintings. We're going to go see Salvador Dali. We're going to be talking about Stockhausen and stuff, right? And that set the table through all of that after the record. And I go, oh, wow, I'm playing avant-garde shit, aren't I? I was just working so hard, I couldn't tell what I was doing.
Yeah.
But then when Art joined the band and I got to hang with somebody, because there was a curious thing, because we were all 8 years younger than Don. Art's halfway between us. And he wasn't part of the early part of that. So he opened the band up emotionally, musically, and I never learned so much from one single person as him. I mean,
Well, I'd love to talk about
go ahead.
I'd love to talk about Decals and really the moment where Art comes into the band and now there's one guitar and there's marimba. There's at times two or drums and percussion. There's a lot more polyphonic bass playing. So it's a very interesting period because it's kind of the same concept, but I think as has been commented, it's a little bit more reined in, and a lot of people prefer Decals to Trout Mask.
Yeah. Is there a question there?
Well, I just wonder if you could tell me about that moment where Art's leaving Zappa to go into Beefheart, and you know how this all sort of comes to be, because Rocket Morton's still there, right?
Mm-hmm. But John French isn't.
But he isn't, but then he comes back.
Right.
So Art, can you tell me a little bit about that intersection?
Yeah, well, I was kind of how should I say? I think Don wanted me in the band, and so because he kept saying, "Come on up to the house and let's hear what we're doing, hear what we're doing." And at the same time, I was getting fed up with Frank, and well, real quickly, when he broke up the Mothers, he formed what he called a power quartet. He wanted a smaller unit there were good musicians, but it was cheap to take on the road. And he consisted of him, of course, on guitar, Ian Underwood on piano and horns. I was playing drums, and he hired a guy named Jeff Simmons to play bass. And so I was happy to have the association, you know, just leapfrog another band. But I really missed the Mothers, and I to be honest, I resented that he broke it up. I didn't see any reason why he was doing that. I mean, at the time, if I were in Frank's shoes, maybe I would have done the same thing. You know, it costed a lot of money to take 8 or 9 guys on the road, and there were a couple of guys that maybe he wanted to replace with guys that were more advanced musically. But anyway, so this was in my mind, and we were doing these rehearsals, and half the time Frank wouldn't even show up. And then we played so in that milieu, Don was kind of enticing me out to Woodrow Wilson, out to Ensenada Drive, the famous Trout House, and listen to the music that they had done, and just hanging out and bullshitting. And Don would talk to the cows came home. I mean, just around the clock, and so I thought, as a matter of fact, we had one gig together with BEEFHEART and this quartet, and it was at a club called The Experience on the East Sunset Strip, joint owned by Marshall Brevitz, who owned a clubs with the same name, The Experience, after Jimi Hendrix and The Experience, in Miami. And we had played there a number of times, and Marshall was very friendly to us, and Frank was, anyway. So we played that, and I remember because I played with both bands. And I don't think the concert amounted to much, but that was the only time I know that we played together. But anyway, after that, I mean, except for the Aquarius concert, I think that was one of the only times the two bands played together.
So would that mean that you played with Drumbo at that moment?
Yeah, must have been, yeah. So I don't really remember about that. I remember who was.
If it was both, you played with both bands, then
Yeah.
I'm assuming the other band had Drumbo.
Must
I'm not
have.
sure though. I don't know if John was still there at that time.
He might not have been. He might not have been there then.
Because I'm thinking it was just quartet.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Could be. Well, anyway, so I started hanging out there, and I guess that nobody ever told me what to play, and of course with my penchant for freeform stuff, I would just play whatever sounded good to me. Well, what I didn't understand was they wanted me, or at least Don wanted me, to learn the parts that John played on Troutmaster Replica, but nobody ever said that. They'd say, like, listen to the albums, and I thought, well, I'll just listen to the albums, and that'll influence me. But if you can, as a musician, sit down and listen to that stuff and use that as an inspiration to learn and play similar, forget the address. At least I couldn't. So I thought, screw it, So was that before or after? I think Bill, didn't you and John start living at my place in Little Canyon for a few weeks?
Me and Mark.
But you and Mark, I mean, not John.
Don Preston had just moved out, and we took his place because Don got a new girlfriend, and we were kicked out.
That's right. That's right.
That's what you do to kids.
So we were whatever we were doing there. And so I came home one day, and they had cleared out. I mean, Bill was gone, Mark was gone, none of their stuff was there. So I said, this doesn't sound right. So I called on my girlfriend at the time, and I said, hey, guess what? The guy's left. She says, you better if you want to be in that band, you better get your ass out there and go talk to him. So I said, okay. So I went out to Ensenada Drive, and there was John. And I thought, oh, I've been replaced. So we sat down and had this long conversation and socialized and so. So I don't know, it was Bill or somebody hit on the idea that since Bill was playing the only guitar part, and a lot of times there was two guitar parts on the material, maybe I could play the second guitar part on the marimba. And I kind of preferred that anyway, because that gave me something I could actually learn to play and play it along with Bill,
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did. So the band became then I guess quintet then.
With Bill as arranger.
Oh yeah. Well, this is a whole other subject matter, but Bill was a bit more than an arranger.
Understood. But I am curious about that process, guys. If you can recall, how the decals material is put together.
Well, the basic big chunks that were not, again, things that were done right on the fly, you know. What's the time? Da, 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 da. Oh, it is Lick My Decals, the tune. I can't remember the stuff anymore now. But that was just a whistled part. But the chunks that were given to me, because it was the duet with Mark and I and the solo piece I did, right? And the things that were built in the way that Trout Mask was done, I was doing the same thing. And actually, through these video things I've been doing with the Trout Mask guys, found out from John that he was doing the same thing. You know, you would drop parts out, rearrange things, and just move things around to make it playable or plausible in some way. So a lot of it was that, you know. I even actually at one point I had combined guitar parts. So I made a combined 2 guitar part, 1 guitar part thing out of it, which was nuts because they're hard enough to play as it is. But I did a few tunes that way, and then that was just probably days before Art shows up and becomes the marimba player, right? So
Do you know the story of Danny Whitten auditioning for Crazy Horse and learning both the guitar parts and coming in and playing a hybrid? So this recalls that. I'd love to hear any of you doing that combined guitar stuff.
Too long ago, man. Too long ago.
No, but
Funny,
that's so interesting.
I still remember some of those parts in my head. I mean, if you put a marimba in front of me, I probably couldn't play them, but I remember a lot of that music. What happened was once I became in effect, the second guitar player, Bill came over to the house and he taught me all that because he knew it all. He knew all the parts. So he would teach me the parts, and the way we do it is he'd play them and I'd write them down in score form, and then I'd rehearse them until I memorized them, because I couldn't pick it up just from him playing it. You know, I say, oh, okay, I'll play it. So, and I had to transpose a lot of it because some of it was, I mean, on the guitar you go plink like this. On the marimba you have like a tenth, you know, in one hand. So I had to transpose a lot of it, but well, anyway, I the fact is that as far as I can tell, I don't know John's view on this, but a lot of the guys that supposedly, you know, took down the parts that Don did. First of all, Don coming in and telling everybody what to play is not exactly the way it went. You know, that's great press, but that's, you know, Don did not have a clue as to how that stuff was going to go together. He didn't even know what went with what. And and I think a lot of the guys that actually were the arrangers or the band lead or the you know, the guys that did the
Music
work
director.
Yeah, director.
Music director.
A lot of it was what they thought sounded good.
Yeah,
I think, because that's why every BEEFHEART band sounded different. Don wasn't any different. So whoever put the music together, it went through his filter, and you know, that's how it came down. So anyway, that was my view on it, and even myself, the few times when I was tasked with taking something off this mishmash that Don had just banged out on the piano, for example, the marimba break in Closet Full of Wine. Closet full of whiskey, closet full of wine, not whiskey or rye.
right.
Yeah.
I copied that off, kind of pulled it out of a thing that Don had played on the piano. Well, I kind of made it to what I thought sounded good.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure if I did that, I'm sure everybody else did that. And so, you know, there was a lot of almost like co-composing going on. I'm sure, of course, nobody ever got any credit for it.
It's true, but to those of us who know this kind of process, we give you guys partial credits
I
because
see.
you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
I understand how these things go down. It happened with Miles's band. It happens with Mahavishnu. It happens where, oh, it's like work for hire, you're working
Yeah.
for me kind of thing. But no, I'm here to talk about those instances where clearly you guys are brought in to make sense of this stuff. And Bill, I was really curious about how Peon came together.
He found the
Well,
white
he's
keys.
talking. I'll be right back.
He found the white keys. And so, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay. So, because that it was black keys and white keys. He was not so intermixed. It became black keys and we were playing in E flat, and I tuned my guitar down low note to E flat. And so we're playing pentatonic stuff, E minor, right? And then with the white keys. And so he just did that one day. But again, I had all these cassettes, a whole, suitcase full of cassettes. And because the cassette was invented, so it was no more reel to reel. And so I honestly, and John did too, but because I talked to him about it, I tried to keep it as much his thing. I did not want to mess with it, but there was just ridiculous things that were unplayable. And then the string of things that would happen, and then there would be just one thing, no, not that it's laid out like that, just no.
Right.
And then I had the cojones at that time. I finally grew some. Anyway, through that time, and then I went, okay, I'm just putting this together in the most sensible way, honoring what he had done and the generalized idea of what he had done. And then I just wanted to be true to it, but I'm not playing stupid things. And so I didn't add things. I didn't write things. I changed existing things and changed the order of them and dropped things out. And then I went up and played it for him. And then, look, Chan, look what I've written. Well,
Right.
okay. And that kind of opened the door then when I realized, okay, I got more reign than I thought I did, more control over things than I thought I did. And so I don't think I didn't want to take that. I didn't want to do anything, but I did the best I could to keep it as close to what he had done. Because I think the way he created art in that way was really brilliant, that he would come out and sculpt the band while we're playing. You get a bunch of hired guys, fuck you, I'm playing this, but it was like, you got these guys that are just trying like hell to play this stuff, and he come out, no, do this. And that created some cool things and made the tunes gel more, when he would do sculpting and things like that, which happened more on Decals than it did in Trout Mask. Trout Mask, he was in bed the whole time.
Right. So he's more involved. You're more involved. Art's more involved.
Yep.
And it's interesting to me because at this point, it's almost like a more focused version of the Trout Mask situation.
So I felt about it.
Yeah.
That's what I felt.
There's just something more graspable about Decals for me.
Mhm.
And also the percussion stuff I just love.
No kidding.
I just, to me, that's like, it's a different band. It really is a different situation at this point. And what's funny is, while you would say, Art, that you're trying to be the second guitarist, it doesn't come across that way necessarily, unless you just look at it like, oh yeah, right, there's only one guitarist. But you see again how the interlocking of parts has to work out. Can you guys talk a little bit about that in terms of working out the marimba guitar and bass as a foundational pitch thing?
Well, I just, I just learned the parts. I guess maybe Jeff had played them, or maybe you had played, whoever played them. The parts were already established. Bill just taught them to me, and we'd play them together. And so then it was an easy task for me to just play along with the band, insert the part into the band.
Right.
But the fact is, when I came at Bill and I hit it off right away. I mean, I just really felt a lot of, I don't know what the word is, camaraderie or whatever it is with Bill. We thought alike, and in fact, even some of the second drum parts on decals, for example, Japan and a dishpan, I was playing off of Bill. I mean, that's who I was listening to more so than anything else. So musically we got along great, and I mean we all got along real good, really, to tell you the truth. So it was easy to play that stuff together. You know, they had done the grunt work, they had done the hard work as far as the trap mass stuff. You know, I mean that was already existing, so all I had to do was learn it.
Something that I watched your other interview with Samuel Art, and the way you described when we lifted for Golden Birdies, when we lifted the Clouds of Full, yeah, the da 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 da, right?
Okay.
And you know how, because he was describing in that thing, and I thought it was really cool because I hadn't thought about it since then. I was working so hard, I wasn't thinking this is in 7 and there's a 30-second note here, or you know what I mean? I wasn't thinking. I was just learning parts and feeling the rhythms. And that you had mentioned some guy had written out that part, and that was like with all these rests because we were late or whatever. But the thing was is that it, like Art said, they floated, and you would just learn the shape of it.
Yeah,
And
the shape of it.
because he was so damn good at it, and I was, I guess, hard-headed enough to just work my ass off to play this thing. And I think Art made me sound much better because he could feel where I was going to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he was chasing me because I couldn't chase him. There's no way. Okay. So that made it really easy because he had the chops. So I was just doing this. And then when we did it later, we were in 2 different rooms, you know, and it was just locked in like that. So
yeah, it was just a perfect memory. We remembered it just the exact same way every time, and we weren't in the. I was, because the marimba is so quiet, as you know, Greg. I was in a separate room with Bill, and we just started out. Well, we started out, and we started playing.
Right, no count off, right?
I don't even know if we did more than one take on that. I can't.
I think we just did it. I think we
just did it in one take. So it's, and because it's not something that. I like that term float because it was a series of notes that just floated, and there was no 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. It was, you know, it was just a ad lib float, and it was, you know.
Is it a float or is it follow the phrase?
Well, there were phrases within the float. I mean, there were several phrases.
Yeah. Where does the Golden Birdies come from? Piano originally? How did do you remember?
You remember Art? You know,
did he whistle it? Did
well, wait. That would have been done. God, were you even in the group then? I can't remember. That part I can't remember. Sorry, was Art in the group, or he had done it and written it out, and I had learned it because it is decals, and then later on, Clear Spot. But damn, I can't remember if
I don't know where he got his poem. I guess he wrote it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then inserted in the pauses were parts from I forget which piece it was. There were you know.
Are you talking about
when we
Clouds
did
Are Full of Wine?
I'm talking about when we did it on the stage.
Right. It was just that it was that part of that was in the middle of.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Right.
That we were just talking about. That's
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
That's what it was.
I thought I left the room.
But that was just broken up into sections.
Right. So we just took it into answers, right? So he just took the pieces and he would say something and we'd answer it. And that's how it ended up being on the stage, right? But it was originally a solid thing that we did together. Right?
Okay.
So Golden Birdies was just taking the pieces. That was Don's idea. I thought it was a cool thing. And then you were doing the drums on that too, right? I think you did the drums on the right and all of that stuff. So how in the hell did did we overdub that part after? I can't remember because there's no way you're playing both parts at the same time. I can't remember how it was done. Sorry.
We're overdubbed it. I think I'm completing the
Me
stage
too.
representation of it from the actual recording.
Right.
I can't remember. But yeah, I did a lot of overdubbing on that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not a lot, but a good amount.
Why do you think he says webcore at the end?
I have no idea. Isn't that the original tape deck or something like that?
It is,
Well, Webcore is
Yeah.
an old radio,
right.
reminiscent of something
But I
that-
don't understand how that follows after all the other lyrics.
I don't know.
Well, it was, like I said, it was just a poem, and
Mhm.
and you know, it's not, it's not
Pantaloon
Robert
duck.
Frost here. It's not Carl Sandburg. It's Don Bluth. So it's basically his pictures and suggestions.
I think it's connected to the duck-like thing because of the duck that's in the pantaloon duck, web feet.
Right.
Might be some reference there.
Well, he does like wordplay, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wordplay and picture association.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And he did rhyme dinosaur with dinosaur.
Dinosaur shoes.
So
There were some happy accidents in that stuff. Well, quite a few. Where he happened to sing. Like he happened to sing the third on top of the bass note that was going on, or he happened to, but it was, believe me, he had no idea how that stuff was going to go on top of the music.
but here's the thing that I really want to ask you guys as well, which is some people say Don wasn't a great singer, and some people say he was a fantastic singer. Is he a vocal stylist? Is he a great singer? What's your opinion, Art?
I think he was a great blues imitator, impersonator. He was totally enamored with some of the old blues guys, and Lightning this and John that, and
And blind so and so.
Mississippi this, and but so he could imitate that stuff real well, just like he could with the harmonica, but Don was I don't think Don was a great singer. He was a great actor, and he was very powerful, and he was a brilliant guy. There's no question about that. But all that Lindbergher about him having a 5-octave voice, I mean, it's just for the press. I mean, I don't even know if he had 3 octaves.
I'll jump in when you're done, Art.
Well, go ahead. I'm just
Okay.
reminiscing.
On your dime, right? Anyway, I have a different idea because I heard him as a blues singer when he was a blues singer, right, in that band. I don't know that I had 14, 15 years old. I couldn't judge what was going on. But I think the key thing is what Art was saying is that when he was imitating people, he was amazing. When it was just him, and as time went on, it got worse and worse. He got worse. His pitch was worse. The stress of being on stage, he definitely didn't know the lyrics, and would just be so sharp and out of tune things, and it got weirder. But still, after that, he would sit down and imitate Bob Dorough, and then he'd do a bebop thing and blow smoke circles through each other while he's whistling bebop. When he was not Don, when he was imitating something, the fucker was brilliant. And he could sing. He was beautiful. He could sing when it was just me sitting there and him hanging out in his room watching football games or something like that, or he'd get a beer or two in him, only 2. And then he could really sing. But I don't think it ever got recorded as good as what I heard when he was like that. So I do think it was there, but I just think this part, the schizophrenia, made him, he needed a way to focus himself to do that, instead of when it was just him, it was scary, and then everybody else paid the price for that fear he would feel.
The persona,
Mhm.
taking on a persona like Bowie did and Gabriel did, and not being who you really are in order to get through it. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I
That
think
was-
Don, it's interesting. I think both Don and Frank were very ill at ease around people. And Don would kind of thunder his way through it, so that he would ever be exposed. And Frank was the same way. If it wasn't something that Frank wanted to discuss, he was lost. And he didn't. He had a very low attention span for anything like that. He always had to be about something he was doing or something that he thought. And Don was kind of the same way. I think he hid his feelings. This really sounds hokey, but his feelings of inadequacy by just blurting out this other stuff that hid what he was really feeling. And I remember one day we were up in I'm probably sure Bill remembers this. We were up in Trinidad at the first place where we all lived at for a while, and Elliot had joined the band, and because Don never sang with the band, he never rehearsed with the band, very, very, very rarely. Once in a while there'd be a jam or something, but so Elliot, I think, and Elliot was just a kind of a very outspoken kind of guy. He just blurted out what he was thinking. And Don came over one day, and pretty soon, Elliot looked at him. He said, "Get your ass in here and sing this shit, man." He says, "Yeah." He says, "Why aren't you singing in these rehearsals? And what kind of deal is it? How do you expect us to?" And I thought, what's Don going to say? And Don just kind of shut up and kind of wheeled his way out of it. And I don't think it really changed anything. But Elliot hit on it. He just wouldn't, maybe it's because he was afraid of him showing up that it was just actually spontaneous stuff that he was doing. Laying this poetry down on top of this powerful music. Of course, later on we did more commercial stuff, and then he had a part, and it was allegedly supposed to do it the same way every time. And then that was a little bit different, So,
Yeah, so that's kind of another question, really, is the transition out of the more avant-garde stuff into Clear Spot and trying to find another way through for him. Did you guys feel invested in that, or did you feel put off by that? How did you feel about the transition? Go ahead, Bill.
At first I was fine. Okay, if we go like Spotlight Kid, I hope I have the right name. I keep calling it a different name, but Spotlight Kid, Clear Spot. In that time period, Spotlight Kid was such a difficult period for me, and I don't like the album. So it's hard to know if I'm attaching my emotional stress through that. But the tempos were slow because these tunes I can't sing my lyrics. Well, dude, we can slow them down. Tell us what to do. That's your problem, stupid. So then we did this very laborious album. Felt like a ghosty heroin album or something. And but I thought the idea, after Spotlight Kid was just a bad period, I thought it was a good idea. And then within the same year, we did Clear Spot, I think. And that was starting to get more powerful. And the band was so fucking powerful when we had Art and John in the band with the marimba double kit, Roy on bass and Mark doing guitar. That band was by far, me standing on a stage, the most powerful band by a long shot. I mean, it was powerful. And so that started to come across in the recording level of Clear Spot. We had Golden Birdies and some edgy stuff. Some of the tunes were, it's a little too foo-foo for me, but whatever. And it was recorded well. We had a month budget. I think we were in the studio for a month with Ted Templeman.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I was good with that. Okay, I was really good with that. Then when it got to the last one and we were working so hard, then it was just, it was just shit. The music was, we were trying, okay, we're going to be commercial. Don was married and he wanted a new car. He wanted money. Okay. So that's what that was. And then he started getting controlled by the DiMartinos and all of that. Right.
Right.
Okay. So I was okay at first and then not on that last one. And then when it really was bad, the obvious thing to do. It's like, okay, we're doing this now. And even on our original interview, Greg, I think I said, suffer for art, okay, suffer for crap, no.
People love that in the comments. Can't love that. Zoot says, suffer for art, maybe. Suffer for shit, no.
Exactly, and it was just kind of obvious.
A great quote, Bill. So that's interesting too, because now, can you talk about that same thing, Art, and give me your feelings about it?
I personally was all for it. I mean, I was really pushing to do more commercial stuff, and for the simple reason that, you know, we'd sell more records, we'd get more money for the gigs, and we'd improve our life. You know, the starving artist is neat only in hindsight. It's not fun when you're doing it.
Mhm.
At least it wasn't for me. And so I was pushing for that. In fact, even there was a couple of songs that I tried to get him to. I said, why don't, instead of using this part that goes from 5 to 7 to 6, I said, why don't we try to smooth it out and make it all in 4? And he kind of looked at me, you know, it didn't make any.
Yeah.
Don would not understand that because he couldn't count to 4 twice. You know, he had no idea of anything like that. But I was pushing for it, and I was really hoping that we would go that route. Now, in hindsight, it was a big mistake. You know, we should have kept doing the decals and trap my stuff and maybe something even more refined than that, but not trying to be a commercial artist because we weren't that way. And Don was not really capable of writing commercial stuff. And so, but we did. And like Bill said, when we finally got to Templeman, I thought, well, we've arrived here because Templeman was a great guy, and he was a hit maker. I don't know, the odds of him taking a ragtag bunch such as we was thin, but he really he made that album sound about as good as you can get it to sound, and there was some good stuff on the album, and I thought we were heading in the right direction. And even when we were rehearsing and in effect composing a lot of the material for Unconditionally Guaranteed, I thought this stuff is great. I mean, I remember remember that song Peaches, Bill?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a blues tune. Da 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 da.
God, he remembers it.
Great feel and and even the lyrics were nice. And I thought this is really good. And we finally got away from all those ridiculous pauses we'd have in rehearsals and have these big talks, and all that stuff went out the window, you know, with the DiMartino there. And I think because they were real masculine guys, and they weren't going to put up with that crap.
Okay,
So,
I got to stop you though, because this is so fascinating to me. They're able to discipline him and focus him.
well,
Wow.
they just kept them away. They just kept them away from the rehearsals. And because Don was in a rehearsal, he was thinking some far out shit, and he'd try to stop everything and have this big discussion about strawberries or something. And you know, so he just kept them away. So we got a lot of stuff done. And plus, let's see, Alex was in the band then, wasn't he, Bill?
Yeah. Alex.
So with Don out of the way, and with Alex being a good, strong, realistic influence, and I was all on board with that, and it kind of changed the whole style of stuff that we'd been doing before. I mean, I don't mean the music, I'm talking about the music too, but the way we rehearsed it and the way it was composed and all that stuff. So we had what I thought was a great product, and we went down there, and the recordings, I thought went well, and I never felt more confident in my time than I did then. I'd finally arrived at what I thought was a good drum time. and I've got a lot of compliments on it. So we finished it up. Bill knows the story. We finished it up. It was, I don't know, a month went by or how long it was. Don had put the vocals on. And I just was very happy about this. I was thinking we're going to get a lot of work out of this. And some of the stuff could actually be heard on the radio, an AM radio or whatever. And so a few weeks go by. Well, they finally set up a box of, or made a copy or whatever it was, of the record of the completed album. And Bill and Mark were real good friends with the guy that owned the record store in Arcata, California. So we all got together and we went over to the record store and we put the record on and turned it up and fired it up. And the first couple of songs, I said, holy shit, this is not good. And then it got worse and worse and worse. And at the end, I just looked up at in fact, I looked at the guy, I don't remember his name on the building.
Dave. His name
Dave, that's right. I says, Dave, I can't believe this. I says, I'm really sorry about this. This is bad. And what they had done was, in order to get his tracks on there, mostly at a low range, they had put the tracks down so low that it was almost incidental. And you could hear his voice, and that was okay, but it was just crap. It was a terrible mix. Some of the songs, his lyrics, good, the way he sang them, and long story short, that was the beginning of the end right there. So that's when we all got together and decided,
Yeah.
So what happens then? Did you feel the same way, Bill?
Oh yeah. We remember this differently because he's older than me even, remembering anything, but it's so long ago and it was intense. I remembered that we were still in the hotel where we were staying, motel or whatever it was, when we had come down to do the recording. And I went to Art's room and said, I'm done with this. This is crazy. Art remembers that we had the meeting when we got back up to Trinidad where we were living. And I know that's when we had the big meeting and stuff, but I thought I had gone to your room and said, Art, I've done all this work, now they're hiring guitar players to do solos and the solos suck. All this time, and I'm not going to get paid again, and we're going to have to go play this shit to an audience that's going to get pissed off, and we won't get paid again. So, but you remember that it was later. So we remember the same idea. I just remember it in a different sequence.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, Bill. I think you did come and we talked about it, but I remember, and I don't remember the syntax, but Alex and I spent a lot of time together, and because we both like to drink, and we were good, good buddies. And he was just kind of a guy; he wasn't some kind of a weirdo. So
I was a weirdo.
Well, not really.
I was.
Not well, anyway. But so Alex and I started kicking around. I said, "This can't go on. We can't keep this relationship up with the band. We can't, this kind of music. It's not working." Don, So that's when we came to Bill and Mark, and we all had a meeting of the minds and had several meetings. And that's when we decided that we'd go ahead and do this stuff, but we had to get a lot more money per week. We had to get, return fare home from wherever we were going to go, Europe or wherever. And that's when all the stuff hit the fan.
So the DeMartinis were not handling business well? Group business?
Well, I don't know that.
So. I think so. I mean, they were, two-bit. They were good guys, and I liked them both. But they weren't Ted Templeman. But they were producers, and they'd done a few things. In fact, Andy had done what was that? Rhythm of the Rain, some popular. So they'd been around, but they weren't, the A type people. but I don't think there was anything wrong with what they were doing business-wise. I mean, there wasn't. I mean,
We
how,
didn't get to
how-
didn't get to any business.
yeah, how much?
We
How many
didn't get
was it?
there. We
Kind of
recorded an
return-
album. We haven't been on tour. We didn't get paid. Did we get union scale? Maybe, I don't know. Usually
Yeah.
it was not, and they just paid our bills and showed me that, oh, you owe us 30 grand, but we're gonna let it go.
Yeah.
But that was just how it always worked. But
Well, meanwhile, they were on the hook for these contracts for the tour coming up.
yeah,
We said we ain't going, and
Yeah.
so they came up and tried to talk us into doing it, and we stuck together and said, no, we're not going to do it unless we get X amount of money, which I think they might have been able to pay, but then of course that would have been more money out of their pocket.
Mhm.
So so that ended it, and God, it was god awful too. I actually felt sorry for Don because they threw together this bullshit band, nothing wrong with the guys, but they didn't know how to play that kind of stuff. And later, Don and I became buddies again and hung out a lot later on. But he told me, he said, Jesus was terrible. He said he'd be on the stage and people would yell out, "Where's Rockhead Morton? Where's ZOOT HORN ROLLO?" And he'd have to make something up on the spot. But they had to do the gigs, because they had a contract. So
Yeah.
that's the way it went.
It's mixed feelings for me because how do you feel sorry for somebody that treated you that way?
Well, what I meant was I
And
could kind of put myself in his shoes.
Oh yeah, I know.
that
Oh, I know.
abuse.
Yeah, but
No, I didn't.
I had a different relationship with them than you did.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
I did. I felt it wasn't how I wanted to do it, but I just couldn't. There was no way I was going to go, okay, I want to help Don out and go on this tour and not get paid playing music that I'm not into.
Yeah, I remember they tried to split you off, and because then you could have taught somebody else to do, but you wouldn't do it. So
no, done.
Anyway, that was the erstwhile little bitty beginnings of Mallard.
Yeah.
By that time,
So how long before you guys are talking about Mallard?
I don't know exactly, but Mallard was a Mark Boston thing. Actually, at the beginning, he had stayed in contact. I think Ian Anderson was touring because this was Ian's influence, right? Touring, and Mark said he wanted to do this, and then I came down from where I was living to LA, and we did a recording session of a tune that Ian had written called "The Magic Band."
Now, was Ian previously a Beefheart fan?
I think so. The way I heard it, the way I heard it, because there was an interview he did, somebody sent me, and where he was talking about Don called him and he said, "You need us as your opening act." And that's how that happened. And he said Don called him. That surprised the shit out of me because I didn't think, Don would do that. But anyway, that was the connections, I think. And then we were their opening act for 2 tours or I can't remember.
Is that
many
right?
weeks.
Huh?
Many weeks.
Yeah.
During Thick as a Brick?
Yeah.
Yeah. It runs my mind. It was like 10 weeks off and on, but maybe it wasn't that much. But we spent a lot of time with them, and I got to know the guys. I really liked them.
Me too.
But every night we were on the stage, you look off to the sides, and they were standing there listening to everything we played.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And he was big in the UK as far as Beefheart's career, right?
Who? What?
Beefheart did pretty well UK wise.
Yes, that was our stronghold. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but anyway, the Mallard thing, to get back, Mark I went down and listened to this song, and then there was some backing track or something. Mark sang it, and I'm going, okay, this is weird. And then I went out to dinner with Ian one night, some very spiffy place, and he said this Mallard thing should happen. And he says, you and Mark should try to do this and get this together. And I'm going, okay, well, there's some impetus talking to this dude that's, I like the dude. He was a friend, and he's got the backing, and he's the one with his truck and all of that because of the English tax law. He needed to spend money on things, right? He had a ballet company, and he did Mallard. But Mark was the one that started it, but then I shouldn't go to the end of it already, but I wore out because I had to do the business.
You had to do the business.
I was doing the business thing and all of that, I was the leader, right? And Art saw the writing on the wall after the first album, went, here we go again. It was fun though. We had fun that one, where were we in Leslie when we were staying there doing the recording. Leslie, yeah. It was the
You're
guitar.
Devin.
Yeah, you even know this shit. But anyway, it started because of Mark made that connection. Then I'm in it, and then I had to have Art, of course. And then John French was going to be involved, didn't want to do it. Then we did a couple of his songs, 2 or 1, I can't remember. John was going to be the singer.
John was going to be the singer.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, John was a better singer than Don.
Oh, yeah.
But the guy that Bill got, Sam Galpin, was great. I mean, he had a similar voice to Don's, but he could sing in tune and he could remember the same thing and do it twice.
Right.
How did you find him, Bill?
How did we find him? We were looking for a singer, and Bill Shumo, the manager, through his connections, we started auditioning a singer, and there was a guy named Jackie Lomax, I think was a pop artist, singer. And I interviewed him, and we went over to the house and stuff. And then I met this other guy that was doing vodka and cornflakes. And I'm going, ooh, okay, maybe not. But he said Sam Galpin had done Joe Cocker demos. And I went, oh, interesting. And he played in Vegas and did country piano and tunes and stuff like that. So he had an edge to him. And then I met Sam, and it was pretty easy. I think we played a couple of tunes. I can't remember how that happened. Hardly anything. And then we're flying to England to do this album. So he didn't. So we're cutting in his parts by half syllables and stuff. And I'm trying to help him sing all these things. So it was a lot of work. But he had the voice. So once he learned the songs, it was easy. And it would have been easy to continue, right? Because he would have done the work and known what to do.
He had the voice and he had experience.
Yeah.
He at one time he was a country singer by the name of Hoghead, and he got hooked up with one of the big record companies, and they would to the point where they'd actually, and he lived down in Huntington Beach, they would actually send a limousine down for him and bring him up. They were going to make him the next, I don't know what, Willie Nelson or something, they thought, and then all of a sudden they found somebody else they liked better. And they just dumped him and dropped him like a hot potato. So he had to. So he was a good guy. I got along with him. Everybody got along with him. It was such a relief to have a kind of a more natural human being to work with. But those were fun sessions. That was at Martin Barr's place. The guitar player.
Yeah, right. I couldn't think of his name. It was Martin Barr. Yeah.
And the beautiful estate he had, and they let us use, what was the name of that mobile recording studio? Moulin Rouge or something like that.
Yeah.
It was red.
That was Ian's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Big Mercedes truck with 24 track in it.
He was owned by Chrysalis Records. I don't remember, but
they were
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I, because I was very reluctant I'd already quit the music business, and I was back in Pittsburgh with my father trying to work with him, and the guys were after me to come over and play, and I said the only way I do is I get the money in advance, and because I just didn't want to get screwed again, and so it was Barry Barlow who put up the money for me. They sent me the money in advance, and I went over there, and I think we did the whole album in like 10 days, and it was really a lot of fun. And that was good material, and it was mostly Bill's. Bill composed most all of that. And well, anyway, and I thought, and Bill was, I don't know if you remember at the time, but Bill was saying, "Look," he says, "you got to come with us because we can really do this." And I said, "I just, I've already made up my mind to get out of the music biz, and I just," because he said he didn't think he could do it anymore with Mark, and he was all the responsibility was on him, which I can't blame them. That is too much. And so, but then I forget how the other album came out. But
Bill, how did the Mallard material come together?
Various people, pieces and stuff. Again, Mark doing a few things, me, friends that were, I wasn't a lyricist, but I had to really kind of work with people. My friend David Wagstaff, a high school buddy, and Ted Alvey, who somebody I met in the Eureka area where we were living in Northern California. And they were writers, and both of them, and both good. And so I'd work with them, but I took credit. Maybe I was a little hungry then for taking credit, because I was working with them to write the lyrics. It wasn't like they just wrote some lyrics and that was the song. It was like I was helping them construct it around this thing. So, and especially on the second album. And the problem that I had, I guess, is it started getting for Mark and things who liked country music. And Sam Galpin, a singer, a country singer. Sam had the vocals, but I'm not a country music fan. And so being diplomatic, that's when I lost interest on the second album, is because it was just going in a direction I didn't want to go. So the tunes that are like, there's 1 and 9, I think, I can't remember them now, right? But those were the tunes, and I was listening to jazz stuff, and I was studying. I was starting to really practice and study after the BEEFHEART thing. So that was learning music and learning the things that you guys have known your whole life, that was an important time for me. So it started influencing music and my taste in music, and country it was going too far that way. It was going to be, okay, we're going to be pop and all of this. And I'm going, if I'm not going to get paid, I better do something I really like. And it was just the same thing. So then I just went, okay, I'm done. I needed to pull the plug. It has been at 26.
Well, you were
I think
26.
the second band, I don't know, but I don't know anything about it. But the band when I played the recorder in the band Mallard, that was a good band.
It was.
And we played well together. And I think had I taken interest in it, for sure, I don't know about the others, but I think we could have really done something with that. But I don't think they would have believed it if we'd have turned into a country band. Nobody would have believed it.
No, it was a mishmash, so the lack of direction, but just the country thing was too much for me. But it was hard for me when Art left, because the fucking motor of the whole thing is gone now. Okay. And bless his heart, George Dugata, and for playing and stuff, but I had played with one of the greatest musicians I've ever seen, and he's in this band, and I'm going, this is great. And then when it went, it was hard for me to do it again. So after the second one, it was leaving that. The first one was raw, and it had propulsion and had angst and stuff in it that it was interesting to me. Second one got too smooth and polished and stuff, and I didn't know what I was doing. I just needed to go hide and practice.
Have you gentlemen seen the Mallard live videos that are on YouTube?
I have. Art's not in them. Yeah.
Art's not in any of them?
No.
It wouldn't be, because I
So
left right after the
you
record.
never played live with the band?
No.
Well, listeners, there are Mallard documents on YouTube. I recommend you have a look. Yeah, I almost feel as though Mallard is enjoying somewhat of a resurgence in interest, or maybe not a resurgence, but a surgence.
Yeah, the money's just piling in, man.
Right.
I had just as a side note, because I'm starting to do these projects about Trout Mask, and I wanted Mark Boston needed some help. He's got some health issues and stuff. And well, we're all 75, right? And I thought, how can I get him some cash? And start thinking, okay, and then this company of those videos you're talking about, the Mallard videos, they said, okay, we want to put these out as some kind of product. And I go, okay. And so then they offered me like $3,500 to do so, like I had the rights. And I go, oh, well, can you up that figure? I don't even want to write back to you at $3,500. And I was just going to do this for Mark. And I thought, was it okay? Maybe this can happen, so get him a check. And then they wanted me to take all all the legal things, like I'm supposed to own it. They want me to take it in the shorts for all of that. And they just make some money off of something that exists, right? And I go, okay, this isn't working. So I bailed on that. So I'm aware of those videos.
Do you have any interest in ever playing that music again, Bill?
Oof. The bigger answer is playing any music. A friend of mine that was a drummer, worked at Berklee School of Music and retired, has been sending me tunes, and they're difficult. I can't even do those anymore. It's my memory is such that it's hard and it takes a lot of work. And I just want to play and not have this bank account attached to what I'm playing. I'm just trying to practice and just play and not do that anymore. I'm teaching, and that's keeping my head into it, and I get to learn. I get paid to learn, and that's that. I've just got to stay there right now,
Understood.
and and it could change, but my life changed so much in the last few years because of health issues and stuff, which has caused memory issues, and so it's hard to do it. And I just don't want to feel bad trying to do things that are so hard. So I play a lot of free music. Right.
But I have to tell you,
Harmonic now. I don't know what.
oh,
key I'm in.
okay. Yeah, and Ornette is someone that figures large in all of our lives in many ways.
Yeah.
But Bill, I have to tell you, since we're having this moment, the one record that people come up to me about more than the Metheny Sign of Four and the Cecil record is the ZOOT HORN ROLLO record that I did with you. They just come out of the woodwork and they say, oh man, I love that ZOOT HORN ROLLO record. Is he going to do another one? And that record really landed. And I'm so proud of that record and really how we made it happen under the circumstances we made it happen, how good your writing is on that record.
Well, thank you.
Slide playing, making a case for slide in a purely instrumental situation. I love the record. I love that people love it. And I just wanted you to know how much people have responded to that record. And I hope that you like that.
Well, I love it. Art needs to hear this though, because here I've had two great percussionists in my life, and Art was so formative to me because I was so young, and he had studied, and we were talking about him playing card table with BBs being dropped on it by John Cage and stuff. And I'm going, what the fuck? And that just changed my life, and the ability. Then when we did, you don't know this, Art, but when Gregg did this Bozo album, and he's here playing in town, and they're doing badass shit. I mean, I'm going, and he wants to play with me. I got to get to work. So anyway, we did this, but he was in New York, I'm here, and I'm flying around doing all this. But he set that fucking thing up. He set that up because he was the first tracks. I'd midied up all these parts, and so he's putting his percussion on. Then I come back and I go, shit, my job's done. This is easy. They were my tunes, but he blew air into them first, and it was badass. So you need to know that part, right? Well, you know that. You were there.
Well, it's a good variety of tunes, and it's not BEEFHEART. And there's just it's Bill, and it's Bill at that time, and Bill being Zoot, but Bill, it's like a new thing. And I think that some people had expected it to be a BEEFHEARTian affair, but they were pleasantly surprised in other ways. And I loved that I could play vibes on it, and that, we could have our guitar and vibraphone trading and things going on. It's a really cool record. So look for it online, folks. If you don't know the ZOOT HORN ROLLO record, we saw Bozo Under the Sea. Highly recommend it. So it's out there on the internet somewheres.
Thanks for the plug.
Was that the title of your book as well, Bill?
No, Lunar
No.
Notes. Lunar Notes is the book.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
And if you can
Well, this-
find a copy of Lunar Notes, folks, if you care about this kind of stuff, Bill has a beautiful book called Lunar Notes.
Good book.
Art, I'm so curious. You mentioned that you had contact with BEEFHEART later on. Could you tell us anything about what those exchanges would have been like?
Yeah. Well, I moved back up to the Eureka area, McKinleyville, Trinidad in the end of '84, and I'd already got my chiropractic doctorate degree, and I'd practiced in Hollywood for a year, and I suddenly recalled Trinidad, and I thought, well, I'll go up there because I wanted to stay in California at the time. I can't believe I'm saying that today, but anyway, at the time, I was gonna stay there, and so I went up there, and big long story short, it was perfect. So we moved up there, and I started to open chiropractic practice. Well, I was aware that Don was still living up there, and I forget how I think he called me or something, and we got together, and then he'd come in to my little clinic for treatment. I'd adjust him, chiropractically, and so that kind of started a relationship. And then I was I was partying pretty hard in those days, and I'd be out drinking a bunch of beers, and I'd always late at night I'd stop over to his house, and he'd be up painting, of course, so we'd sit there and bullshit, and we got together as a couple, as a quartet a few times with Jan and my wife at the time, Judy, and got together. So but it was I don't know, it was off again, on again, and then we had a falling out. We got in a big argument, and that was that. But Don, it kind of hurt my feelings because Don got very sick, with the MS, and which I'm not a neurologist, but I think it has something to do with the cocaine and all that kind of thing. But anyway, but he was still coming to me. Well, he'd come in, and he'd be standing there, and he'd start to sway, and I say, sit down, but then I'd adjust him, especially his lower spine, and he'd get up and he'd be all right. But then he'd come in, and it was starting to get worse. And so finally I told him, I said, Don, I said, you got to go to the neurologist, man. There's something more to it than anything I could possibly help you with. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew it had a neurological disorder. So he hardly even wanted to hear it. And so I spoke to Jan. I said, you got to take him down to get him diagnosed, which they eventually did. But I read later where Don had told some interviewer, he said that if I had kept treating him, he wouldn't have gotten MS. And I thought, oh man, that's because I could have helped him at all with that. I mean, anymore I could have helped somebody with cancer or a heart attack. Anyway, it bothered me, but that's the way he was. Whatever came was mine. And he had a bad end. I didn't see him during that period because we already ended our friendship more or less. But last I don't know how long, year or more of his life, he was just bedridden, couldn't speak, and that's a hell of a way to go down. He had the bad form of MS. There's some forms that aren't as bad.
Right.
You kind of die with it rather than from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known several people that carry on a normal life, and they just die of natural cause. But he had he went down pretty fast, pretty hard. So it was pretty rough.
Do you think that he felt appreciated as either a musician or an artist, a visual artist?
He felt appreciated.
Yeah. Did he feel as though, it had been worth it to change over to painting? Did he miss music? I mean, what was that?
I think he was happy to get out of the music business because for a whole bunch of reasons. The obvious reason is that he just could do it by himself and nobody else was involved. And then if somebody liked a painting, sell it to him, that was that. And there's no baloney involved like with the music business, which is probably second only to the acting business is the most rotten business in the world. I mean, it's just rotten to the core, top to bottom. Plus, I think Don was holding up under a lot of illusions that people had about him. I think he knew he was to be frank, knew he was in some ways a phony, and it was very hard to keep that up. When you had to do that all the time, he had to always be on, and always be on stage, and always have the perfect comebacks, and which he was very good at. But I mean, that must have put him under a lot of pressure, and I think that was the reason why he developed a lot of nervous problems. Because he'd break out, and because to try to do that 24/7. I mean, I don't know. Plus, he was a very unusual guy anyway. Brilliant, but he's just a strange guy. Unique guy, a cornucopia of hip. And
that's a good way to put
the
it.
point where he'd influence people around him to try to be like him.
Was he
So
a
I think
big reader?
once he shed all that, he didn't have to worry about any of that anymore. And he didn't have to worry about a new band and going through the whole thing again and get somebody to be the commander of the band and distribute the music and compose and direct the music and all that kind of stuff. I think that was probably a big relief to him, especially after he met I forget the painter's name that helped him so much, big name painter. After he met him and realized that he could make big bucks off some of his canvases, there it was.
Yeah.
And then he had a nice house and right on the bay there in Trinidad. And it was a beautiful setting. It really was nice. So I think he was very relieved for all that, and he could concentrate on painting, which he did on and on and on.
But did he care about music anymore?
I don't think so. I used to go over there, like I said, and we'd spend hours, and I'd play him all kind of stuff, and even some Hank Williams and stuff like that we talk about. But I don't know if he. I don't know if he really.
Did you guys ever see BEEFHEART and Ornette together?
Oh yeah. What was your question?
Did you ever see BEEFHEART hang out with Ornette?
Yeah. Ornette was a big fan of the band, and he brought him around to a few shows, and they hung out together, I guess, in New York or wherever they happened to be. In fact, one of the biggest regrets I have was I forget where we were, and Ornette came to the gig, and after the gig we were bullshitting, and Ornette said, "Hey," he told me he really liked my playing, which was. I mean, when I was coming up, listening and reading Downbeat magazine, listening to jazz messengers and Dave Brubeck, and then hearing Ornette, and for him to say that to me was very flattering. And he said,
I have to tell you though, because this is such a weird coincidence between us being percussionists. The one project I did for Ornette, I played timpani.
Oh, really? Was that New York?
Yeah. And it was in 2000, and he was putting together the Harmonic Chamber Players.
Okay.
To play his piece La Statue for tribute to the Statue of Liberty from the French. Right. And we played it in the Battery Park in view of the statue, and then we recorded it at his studio. But there was me and a bass player, and I had 4 timps, and I actually tried to be like the second bass player. And
Right.
again, this is really funny because it's like you look at the two guitar thing and then percussion takes over one of the guitar parts. And this was like, I know Ornette's like two bass players. He's got that guy playing upright, but he doesn't have a second bass player. I'm playing timpani. I have 4 timpani. I'm starting, I'm doing the math. And then, and you'll love this because he comes over to me in the first day of rehearsal and the timpani part has been on my stand and I'm looking at it because I'm first time I'm seeing it. And it's dun 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 dun. I'm like, there's no fucking way. There's no fucking way. I'm like, I'm smart enough to know Ornette's music. 5 minutes later, he sees me looking at the part. He comes over to me. He stands next to the stand and he points to the part and says, I don't want you to play any of this. I want you to do your own thing. Yeah. I said, okay, Ornette, I can do that. He's like, yeah, just play what you think, what you think is right. And I'd worked with Cecil Taylor before. So like, I knew that these guys would either trust you or no, or that's just the way it works. It's super democratic. I love it. But that was the case with all those guys.
Was it free form or was it rhythmic?
I played both, but I didn't play the part. I
Right.
just had to, we all had to do an unaccompanied solo and we all had to do, it was like a chamber ensemble. So, small strings, a few winds,
Oh, okay.
upright bass, and then the loose solo off on trumpet. So that was great.
Wow.
And Gary Giddens was producing it. And it was really interesting because it was like his other chamber music, except now I couldn't play drum set, which I ideally wish I could have played with him. But no, I had to play timpani. And so as a result, I tried to play polyphonically and even with my fingers and different ways of getting attacks to try to fit in with the texture of the upright bass. And I was always fascinated by these guys using 2 bass players. Frank did it one time, Cecil did it, Alan Silver, Henry Grimes. There are a lot of that was a thing, like, why 2 bass players? What do you do when you have 2 bass players? Just like what do you do when you have 2 guitar players? What do you do when you have 2 drummers? You better figure it out.
Did you know Buell Neidlinger?
Pardon?
Did you know Buell Neidlinger, the bass player?
Yes, sir, I did.
Losing pet. There you go.
Yeah, Buell is an interesting figure.
Yeah.
And for many reasons, and just as a through line of bass players that are virtuoso bass players, and like Ornette loved Scott LaFaro and Bill Evans loved Scott LaFaro, and there became this new breed of bass player after Charlie Hayden. A lot of these polyphonic bass players.
Well, I know you interviewed Jean-Luc Ponty,
Yes.
one of your early ones, and when he and Frank did King Kong with Jean-Luc, for some reason he had me play drums on it, not vibes, and it was the vibes I played on the road. But he hired Gene Estes to play the vibe part. But Buell Neidlinger was on the session, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, man, these guys, the guys that he had playing were just all stars. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
He and Buell, and I forget anyway, he had 2 or 3 guys who were big names, and it was a great. And I never really knew Buell that well, but that was the only time we ever played together.
Well, did you know this LA bass or maybe San Diego bass player, Bert Turetsky? Do you remember him in the classical world?
No, I don't.
Okay. So he was another one of these, flagship admiral bass players who just played the entire instrument, and knew every harmonic on the instrument, and
Yeah.
brought the bass to this new level so that it was particularly when I had my band with Mark Dresser, it was possible to write for the bass and actually cover harmonic material rather than
Wow.
just bass roll.
Wow.
You know, guys could play double, triple stops, etc.
Who was that? You had mentioned Bill Evans. Who was that guy the great bass player that played with him and he died in an auto accident?
Carla Farrow.
Charles Farrow. Okay.
Carla
Yeah,
Farrow, yeah.
he was something else.
Well, and David Eisenson too was another classically trained bass player. I mean, there's a through line with that where it kind of people say bands live and die on the drummer. I get that, but I think a lot of bands live and die on the bass player.
It's the combination.
Yeah.
And
The
the
drummer and the bass
combination, of
player,
course, is important.
I think they have to really get along because if they don't, because that's the whole band is the feel of it. I mean, in most music, not all music. But when I was in LA, I never knew any of the classical guys. I knew the studio guys, I knew the rock guys.
Well, they were studio guys too, but yeah.
But
You didn't do soundtracks?
it may surprise you to realize or to hear me say that of all the different kinds of music I played, I enjoyed symphonic playing more than anything else.
Is that right? That's
Yeah, in fact,
fascinating.
but at the time, I wanted to get out of it because of what I said before. They weren't doing anything new. But I enjoyed the physicality of it. I enjoyed the performance of it, and I enjoyed playing all the different instruments.
Did you
And,
play timpani on Beethoven's Seventh?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But I played timpani 2 years with the Dayton Philharmonic, and then I was a timpanist with the Manhattan School of Music Orchestra, which was a good orchestra.
Oh yeah. Oh, I've heard that orchestra play Varese, and I've heard that orchestra play Kenton. I mean that I used to go to Manhattan School concerts all the time and Juilliard concerts all the time, and I poached players from all those groups to do my stuff.
When
And
I went there, they were still over on the east side
yeah,
before they took over the Juilliard building.
right.
It's not even there anymore. But Paul Price was I got to play in his percussion ensemble, and
Did you play ionization?
Yeah. Did we do? I don't know if we did ionization or not. I don't remember what we did, but he was always looking at me because I'd pull out all these different kind of mallets from Fred Hinger, at the touch tone. And anyway, so they're always curious about that. And then we went down to, I think one of the network orchestras they had an open session every Saturday, and you could get down there, and if you were an advanced music student, you could go out and sit in with them. And I remember sitting in with them on timpani, and all these other guys that were Goodman students. They're looking at what's that shit. I had all these weird looking mallets, and the style of playing was so much different. But I don't think timpani was my favorite, but I did enjoy it. But I enjoyed it a lot. But I just enjoyed the whole percussion thing,
Yeah, it's an incredible universe.
Yeah.
I do a lot of solo percussion music, percussion ensemble, percussion features. It's really it's kind of been in static in some ways, but now things are opening up in so many ways, largely due to
I can't believe how developed and how splashed open the percussion is today.
yeah.
It's like 100 times more than what was going on when I was playing. I mean, everything from the drum corps to everything. It just
Drum circle.
everybody has 10 marimbas and 5.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. It's really come into its own. Percussion.
Yeah, I
So
had
it's probably a lot of work for percussion.
my marimba quartet was premiered at Cal Arts.
Oh, really?
And it's a tough piece, but the level is high for this kind of thing.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
that's kind of one thing I hinted at in our email was the special skill set that each of you brought to those playing situations, to those challenges. And Bill, I'm curious if there was anything in particular that you remember about bizarre fingerings, or did you guys have to fuck with tunings, or what was it like in the most extreme BEEFHEART moments? Do you recall?
Yeah, like I said earlier, when Don found the black keys and we were playing in E flat,
Yeah.
and I'm the only guitar player, so I wanted some low sound. You know, usually I would not even play my low 2 strings to get out of the way of a bass player, but that group didn't work that way. You could have a traffic jam in the low frequencies. Okay, so I'm tuned to E flat, so I did that. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of times where I just would find ways to do things. I don't know that I tapped. I think I did tap, which is normal technique, you know, now. But I think I'd have to play something to tap it, you know, that kind of thing. But not much in tunings, you know, really not, you know, other than the obvious blues oriented stuff that's in open tunings and is so obvious. But no, it wasn't that. It was just barring in weird places.
Yeah.
You know, my hands couldn't do that now, but you know, just weird places to be barring 2
Well,
strings.
you have big hands.
I don't really. They're just skinny.
Okay, so did that play into this?
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, when you're looking at these parts, and especially when John would hand me these things, and you know, I would use like notes on a thing or some type of graphic because I was a terrible reader, but just so I could remember, because I'm just learning this part. You can't remember that shit, so I'd make those things and then try to play it and go, I can't do that. What notes, you know? And I worked that out with John, you know, or later, I'm not playing that note. I can't do it. But I always tried to do as much of what was originally given to me. And so, yeah, there was times it was weird, like playing like this to get bar 3 strings here and get that length, you know. I should have gotten little clamps and things, you know what I mean? Temporary capos that would just grab the guitar in different places, and prepared guitar. I should have done that.
Prepared guitar, Bill.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This, I even have it. When you stick this sucker in the strings, this is a piece
Yeah.
street cleaner, right? The street cleaners, they have this wire thing. I go pick them up because you put them in the strings at different places and you get an African thumb pick sound and shit like that out of it. It's really cool.
All about prepared percussion, prepared piano. Love it. That's so cool.
Yeah, I certainly love the prepared piano. You know, Cage premiered.
The Tudor?
When I was working with him, he premiered his I forget the name of the piece, prepared piano, and a local pianist at the conservatory there, she played it, and it was really beautiful. You know,
It is. And I heard
Cool shit.
past summer played outdoors, and there's something really beautiful about it. I actually demoed touching the strings in one of my recording classes recently. They didn't know you could do that, you know. So it's really amazing what, in fact, Andy Partridge of XTC asked me to ask Bill, what did you play on the opening track of Bozo when you played solo? Was that a harmonizer?
Got a buzz on, yeah. Distortion, harmonizer, yeah.
Distortion and harmonizer.
Distortion and a harmonizer, yeah. I can't, it's a long time ago, you know.
But he loves that track, and he wanted to know how the hell you got.
It was a harmonizer. I think I saw your interview with him, but yeah, I can't remember what interval I had the harmonizer set to. Honestly, you know, a long time ago, 20 years.
Yeah, no, I think it was a 7th.
But anyway, it was yeah, it was just heavy distortion, you know.
That was great.
I was just trying to do my cheapo fake weird bebop, but not bebop. Right? Mechanical, sort of like a mechanical monster trying to be bebop, right? I got a buzz on, is kind of obviously. Back then I had a buzz on, you know.
Cyborg bop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
You talk about some of the complicated and complex fingerings and intervals and chords and so forth on the guitar. I was always knocked out about the bass parts. Some of the, and with finger picks and because it is, you know, Mark really must have worked hard to be able to learn to play like that. I remember Bill might remember this, when I think the first tour we did, or one of the first tours we did, we opened in New York at a jazz club called Unganos. And
I do
so
remember.
do you remember that?
Oh, God, yeah.
So we went down there in the afternoon to do a sound check. And at one point, Mark was testing his speaker or something, or other, and he started just playing some of those complicated bass parts. And I look up there, and Mingus came to listen, and Pharaoh Saunders and all these. So here's Mingus standing there in front of the stage, looking up at Mark, and Mark is just ripping through this stuff that nobody would ever be able to figure out how to do that stuff. And Mingus just looked at him and just shaking his head. You could see him saying, "I don't know what that white boy's doing."
So glad you mentioned that, Bill. Before you
Go.
jump in, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because if you're paying attention to BEEFHEART music, you gotta notice the bass parts. They're insane.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, exactly. They are insane. I do remember that gig, because that's the gig that my guitars were stolen by the cab driver
Right.
at,
yeah.
we were going to Ornette Coleman's loft to pick up Don to go to the gig. And the cab, because Langdon Winter was with me, he was a writer for Rolling Stone. He couldn't stay in. I said, just wait here, I'll get Don. He was right behind me wanting to meet Ornette Coleman. The cab drives off with our gear. So I'm borrowing a guitar to play in front of Pharaoh Sanders, Joe Henderson, Charles Mingus, scared to death because I know who these guys are. But anyway, I get to the gig, sort of. And then after the gig, I'll never forget it, because Mingus was still just staring at the stage. He wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't fucking look at me. And his wife, I think she was a blonde woman.
Susan.
Yeah, okay. And so, and I said, Mr., little kid goes up, Mr. Mingus, what'd you think? Gee whiz, I said, what'd you think? He wouldn't even look at me. And then she looked around his belly, because he was a big dude, right? She went, he really liked it. And then she got back in line again. That was my conversation with Charles Mingus.
You made Mingus speechless.
I don't know. Or he didn't want to talk to some weirdo. I don't know. But he was just standing there staring forward. He wouldn't look at me.
No, I think he had to hear it. I found out a lot more about Mingus's avant side. He got it all.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys that were super, super smart and were coming into a third stream area were really, really well versed in classical and jazz and out shit. They knew everything. Even Jocko, he knew everything.
Oh yeah.
You look at those guys that are known for their thing or whatever. Zawinul had atonal and microtonal orchestral music that we'll probably never hear.
Right.
Or like people will never hear my chamber music, but hopefully someday they'll hear some of it. I need to do a chamber music recording, but yeah, it's really true that you guys were there witnessing this collision of all these worlds. And I was always fascinated by Don's so-called horn playing, but knew that he was connecting to Pharaoh, knew that he was connecting to Dolphy, knew that he was connecting to Ornette, and dug that shit.
Yeah. I thought he did a really good job of not knowing what he's doing and making the thing sound good. He really did, because he could push air.
Yeah, he had a tremendous lung capacity.
Yeah, he could push air, and he had a great artistic sensibility. So once it's in that level, and he could just not have to know notes, but he could use sounds. And when he found one, he would get creative with it,
And do you know the connection between that and Ornette playing violin backwards and upside down?
Yeah.
They want the they want this primitive, this pre-conventional.
Yeah.
And it's a while, and then I always kind of appreciated. I mean, I would have loved to have heard other soloists as well, but the idea of the blowing over the top of a totally worked out quartet thing underneath that you guys used to do, and just marvel at that's kind of cool. Like, you could listen to this one thing, or you could listen to this thing with it, which totally obliterates the other thing in one way. So it's highly conceptual, but at the same time, you kind of I want to hear certain pieces without the horns, and the horns weren't worked out. I'm conflicted.
Yeah, no, Yeah, I get it.
Because clearly hair pie, I mean, that's some really worked out shit. Did you play marimba on hair pie, Art?
To be honest, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I remember
Hair pie is trout mask.
But I mean, did you
yeah,
ever?
but we played a lot of trap mask stuff
Yeah, I don't yeah.
later.
What was included that you can recall?
Concluded?
What was included from Trout Mask that you might remember?
We played out.
Played live, played later. Yeah.
I think it was My Human Gets Me Blues was more one that we played. John
We
French
played
would
Steal
know that.
Softly. We
Steal
played
Softly, yeah.
Veterans Day Poppy. There were 6 or 8 we played routinely.
He remembers.
That's fascinating.
Mm.
You know, like what did he really believe in still from that period? You know, what's kept and what's eschewed. But it is interesting. Like so was Well ever performed during that time, or any of the solo vocal jaunts?
Not that I know of. He would have had to remember his lyrics, so no.
Did he always play with cue cards?
Or
his
didn't,
book?
or didn't. No, he had the stuff here, you know, but he got better at it, I guess. But we were doing simpler music. When we were doing Trout Mask and stuff like that, that's why we didn't do it, because I don't think, maybe that's why we didn't tour, is because there's no way, you know, that he was going to be able to remember that and read those lyrics at that tempo and stuff. No.
And was he into?
I often wondered about that myself, because some of that stuff is not easy to remember.
No.
And, you know, so I mean, I could never really hear what he was singing anyway. So I often wondered about that.
And do you guys know his later stuff at all? The last 2 records, Dock at the Radar Station or Ice Cream for Crow?
Those are the 2 that are mentioned, but I had enough.
Well, I was on Shiny Beast.
And you're on Shiny Beast on marimba.
On marimba, and I may have played some miscellaneous percussion, but mostly marimba.
What was that experience like?
It was a lot of fun because I had no responsibility. All I had to do was come in and play the part and fart around, and I wasn't burdened with being in the band.
How do you get a part? What's your part?
I'm sorry.
What is your part? What do you get as a part for a BEEFHEART session at that point in time?
Well, at the time I got scale. See what
No,
they
I
did
guess. No, I mean, was there a written part?
Oh yeah.
By whom?
What I did was very simple.
I'm just
I don't remember. It was more. A lot of it was more harmony, like on Candle Mambo. It's very simple, just 2 or 3 chords.
Did you play on Love Lies?
Maybe so. Yeah.
I have to say, pretty great later period, Don. Love Lies is killer.
Yeah.
What about When I See Mommy, I Feel Like a Mummy?
Yeah, that was kind of nice. I don't think I had anything to do with that one. I heard them play that at I think it was at the Roxy or when I came back.
There's some moments, man.
Yeah.
You know, and I love that he just sort of goes out in his most out fashion, you know, like making love to a vampire with a monkey on my knee, you know, and like he's just going straight right to the end. Ghosts and brickbats and curtains blowing and freaking out, and just his visual language. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I've known a lot of hip guys in my life, but there was nobody that I could ever spew out that stuff over and over and on and on and on.
It's remarkable.
Stop pictures and colors and hip phrases and double entendres and
and circles don't fly, they float. You know, I'm just like, just these things that are just ultimately quotable. Sue Egypt, or you know, that's raspberries. Like, what the fuck is going on here? And can anybody make sense of it? I mean, Pachuco Cadaver? You know, I
Great
just
stuff.
frequently I have to take breaks from this stuff, guys, by the way. But it's like when I come back to it, it's still there's still something there for me. And I guess that's a compliment. Really.
Well, it's totally unique, and you know, you never
There's
hear anything
always
like that
something
again.
there.
Yeah.
And going back to decals, it really is, it's a special brand of rock music. It just, it really is. And that whole really meaty part of that curve, I think deserves, and this is what, it's coming on 50 years now,
Over,
Yeah, that
over
was
50 years.
yeah, 71 was
yeah,
decal.
71. Was,
Yeah,
So 50 years has passed, and we're looking at this stuff, and I say that's pretty damn good. I wish that we could get a remaster on it. Do you know
definitely.
anything about the existence of the masters?
No, John French would, because he's been trying to get, he's in contact with Ahmet Zappa, who owns all that stuff. And,
might be Universal now.
yeah, I'm
Universal
not
is
sure.
the
I know
same.
they weren't lost in the fire. I know that much. But, he's doing a remix of Trout Mask. That's what he wants to do. And again, this project that we're working on, the four of us with moderators, has brought all of this.
Who's working on it, Bill? Tell us about it.
Well, I could just, maybe I can pull up you can't hear the audio, but I could show you a little video clip here. Maybe.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we did is, and that's Billy Bob Thornton.
Oh, right.
And so we did the four of us because Jeff left the band in a very awful way. And
Right.
so that was that story I was talking about, Mark, and how to create money. So then I started thinking of documenting the Trout Mask album.
Oh,
And so we
good,
did,
Bill.
so we did,
Fantastic.
so we did four moderators: Billy Bob, Steve Troy, who runs the BEEFHEART site, Samuel Andreev, you know,
Yep.
and Matt Groening, the Simpsons guy.
And you didn't
Okay.
call me?
Huh?
And you didn't call me?
I didn't get to make the choices, Greg. That we went with those four guys. I mentioned you, of course, but
Were you happy with it?
I don't know what it is yet.
I
We're
see.
just
So
working
it's
on.
being put it together. Okay.
Okay, Art, do you see this?
Yeah.
This is, you know, the culprits here, and that's Billy Bob Thornton, who Art also knows. Anyway, it's just documenting us talking and having these moderators ask questions much like this, that we'll have to really cut down to just speak to the things that we've been talking about, but through their eyes, right? And I just thought documenting it before one of the four of us was gone.
Well, I've had my John French experience, but I'd really love to talk to Rocket Morton.
I'll see what I can do. I'll be talking to him in a week or so.
Yeah. Well, Art's smiling over there.
That's gonna be a difficult project for you.
I mean, this, if I'm gonna say it in any episode, I'll say it in this one. John French called me to play drums on the 50th anniversary of Trout Mask, and it didn't happen due to COVID, I guess, and also due to other issues. But that was quite an honor for me because, you know, I work with Gary Lucas, I work with Zoot. Music has always meant a lot to me. I think it's influenced my piano trio music. I have a piece for piano trio called Hysteresis, which is dedicated to Don. You know, I have a piece called Immediately Peeled for marimba solo. You know, so Don's language and his kind of world has really influenced my concept of post. I don't know if it's a post, in some ways it's the earliest punk shit. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know what it is, right? It's like this super sophisticated thing, but it's a super punk shit. Am I crazy?
No, I agree.
It's super punk. It's like the biggest fuck you in music. Besides 444. 443, whatever the Cage piece is. Like, I just think it's that monumental. I'm sure all your moderators have said this to you, but like, I worked with Cage for one day and I got a sense of what he was and what he wasn't. And that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Mhm.
It's like, these are human beings. They're fucking brilliant. But what they are and what they aren't becomes very apparent to you in many painful and, really meaningful ways. And that Cage music and that Cage opening up, I think was influential for a lot of the California guys and beyond. I mean, Cage penetrated into Europe with a lot of that conceptual shit. And then you had Stockhausen. So, it's one thing for me. It's one music for me, especially when we think about how huge Stockhausen was for every fucking person on this program.
Mhm.
Down to everyone almost every one of my episodes, somebody brings up Stockhausen. It's like miles, you can't get around it. And Stockhausen was just performed at my college here, the University of New Jersey, and it was massive. So it's like the smartest guys to have been in their presence, to be around when they're around. I don't think we can discount that. And you guys, I really appreciate you sharing all this with me because it's a little geeky, but it's a lot of fun. And I mean, I feel like we could go on forever, and I know you guys have to probably get to dinner now or lunch, whatever. But thank you so much.
Well, it's a lot of fun. You have a heck of a trove of interviews. I'm going to have to pour through some of them.
Worth the journey, man. There's some
I
people
like,
I'm not familiar with, but man, Hal Galper, I mean, you got players that I got their books here and I'm going, man, this is a great book. And then you're interviewing them, right? So
Yeah. No, I have
Sam,
the thing where
Sam Andreev is a friend of mine, which and he's very articulate, a very bright guy, very articulate. And,
well, we try to be very clear about this.
yeah,
I think that's the new approach really for me is let's have a clarity about what this isn't, and how it's done. What can we get out of it? I teach a songwriting class where we just do Don's lyrics. I don't give a shit if they can't hear the music well. They can't deal with it. It's like, listen to this set of words.
Mhm.
Listen to Ken Nordine.
word jazz.
Word jazz, yeah.
Word jazz. Don't you think that Don's a beatnik?
Definitely. Totally beat.
Beat damage, right?
What?
Total beat damage till the end.
Yeah.
That's his world.
Was.
It's great though. The language thing, I mean, think about it. Those cafes with people reciting poetry and language is exploding, and he's there with Ginsberg. He's there with those guys.
Mm-hmm.
He's so
He never would have had those relationships.
Clearly. But Cecil didn't really either.
Yeah.
They just.
But I mean, as far as the beatnik scene, I knew some of those guys. Well, not some of the guys. I knew Ginsberg.
Yeah, and Don was not in touch with them.
No, I think he would have put the whammy on all of them. I think I don't know. I'd like to have known Burroughs, but
Ornette was friends with Burroughs.
what's that?
Ornette was friends with Burroughs.
I'm not surprised. Yeah. I didn't care much for Ginsberg, but I'd like to have known some of them. They were just a little bit before my time, a few years.
Mr. Cage used to show up at concerts in the 80s and just sit in the audience.
Who did?
Mr. Cage, he was around. You could talk to John Cage and, on the street,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
he was cool. Max,
I had a lot of fun with him. I was working with him for about 6 months, and we did a lot of concerts, and we did a lot of unusual shows, and I got my overriding memory of him was that he was really kind of an imp. He had a great sense of humor, and he was serious about what he did, but he also could take it or leave it. It was an interesting. Well, being basically a Buddhist, he kind of took it as it came. But I remember he did a lecture. He had a lecture in front of the psychiatrist community in Cincinnati at one of the big hospitals. There were like 30 or 40 psychiatrists there, and he was, why they chose him for a lecture, I'll never know. But Morton Feldman had just blown into town, and for some reason they invited me to go along with them, and I thought that was great. So
did you play Feldman?
What's that?
Had you played Feldman?
No, I haven't. I'd like to, but I wasn't even aware of his stuff until much later. I would have had I known about it.
It's cool stuff.
But at any rate, like King of Prussia and all that. I guess some of this. But at any rate, so we gave the lecture, and the guys kept trying to tack Cage down, which is not possible to do. And so anyway, it was a lot of fun, and I think Cage really impressed everybody. But when we left, we walked out of the building. I remember Feldman turned to John. And he said, Johnny, he says, they just don't understand the artist. And I thought, well, there you go. They don't, because you're trying to take a scientific endeavor and superimpose it on top of an artistic endeavor. It doesn't work.
And mysticism.
Any more than business doesn't work with the artist.
And aleatoric.
Yeah.
And then, just the most extreme stuff. But it's just so high-minded. I just, I really believe that. And that's where I want to exist.
It's a tricky area. I mean, you have to have a pretty good grip on yourself, I think, to mess
or
around.
you could really lose yourself, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of sham and bullshit too. So you have to, I mean, if you can draw a black line across a canvas and somebody wants to pay $1 million for that, you got to figure that there's maybe some sham can get crept in some of the stuff. And I like the guys that have done the classical way first, and then they went out.
Can I tell you, I saw Don's paintings in person. I hope you have, but I just wanted to mention to the audience, when I saw them in person, they're three-dimensional.
Yeah.
I really did not realize this. The layers of paint and the manipulation by finger or whatever the fuck he's doing of the texture of the drying paint or whatever he's using, whatever medium he's using, it really comes at you. And so I don't know if you can get to see them. Obviously, see the pictures, go on YouTube. But really, those things are pretty impressive. I have to say, the amount of surface detail.
Yeah, I've seen it. Well, I've seen a lot of his stuff, and I'd say he's as good as anybody else painting in the abstract world.
Some of them are scary.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Some of the creatures that he painted.
Some of those creatures are scary to me.
Yeah.
I have a piece called Candle Powered Rodeo Ghosts. That's one of his. I'm like, yeah. Candle Powered Rodeo Ghosts.
He could turn a phrase.
He could turn a phrase.
Greg,
Bill,
I gotta
Bill,
go.
you've had it. You've
Yeah,
had it.
I
Bill,
mean-
I know. Okay,
Okay.
guys. Thank you.
Thank
so-
you.
Yeah,
Thank
And I'll
thanks
be
for-
looking for you online. I want to hear some of your stuff.
I'd be happy to continue sharing stuff with you, and it's my pleasure to meet you, Art Tripp, and Bill Hargler, you are the man as always. You're the source,
Hey, Greg.
bro.
It's good seeing you again, brother Bill.
Yeah, we'll keep in touch now.
We will.
Okay, take care of yourself, Art.
All right,
Guys.
hang in there.
Thank
Okay.
you so much. All the best.
Oh.
Happy holidays. Everybody, this has been the ProgCast with Gregg Bendian. My guests have been Art Tripp and Bill Harker, ZOOT HORN ROLLO, talking about only the coolest shit.
Somebody asked me when this will be put up.
Very soon.
Okay,
Yes, this is a great one. It may have
Okay,
been
then.
one of the longer ones. I've been trying to keep them shorter. It's not working out. And you have interesting people talking about the coolest stuff, and that I try to keep a handle on that. We're talking about the coolest stuff. Thank you guys. You guys are the best.
Okay.
take care.
Everybody hit us on Patreon, like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Bye bye, guys.